I want to talk about one of my favorite places in Rome. This is the Church of St. Mary and the Angels and the Martyrs. It was built in the Baths of Diocletian. It looks like a ruin. Like, you walk by and you're like, what is this? It's like there's a cross on it. There's some one side of the entrance. Okay, it looks good. It's curved inwards, which is interesting. And then the other side is just broken, right? There's just exposed bricks. There's grass growing on it. But do not miss the interior of this place. So this, like many structures of the Roman Empire, fell into decay. It was a massive bathhouse, actually the largest ever built in the empire. So the central area still stood. So there was the concrete ceiling and the walls. That whole structure was still there. So sometime during the Renaissance, I think, I'm not sure in which century exactly, they turned it into a church, and it is beautiful. It's grand, it's huge, and there's really this sense of, wow, this was a Roman bathhouse, you know? Anybody could come here. This is really the only place where you get that sense of grandeur, where you still have this ceiling. The baths of Caracalla are more famous, but they are nowhere near as well preserved. So the baths of Diocletian, though large parts are completely ruined, this central area did survive, and you just walk in there and you can see how grand it would have been inside one of these bathhouses. This was the largest, but it gives you an idea of what it could have looked like. So though all the marble is not ancient, some of the pillars are. They're made out of Egyptian granite. You can see them. They're pink. So this church is interesting for a few reasons. First of all, you might notice that there's like lines on the floor, and then there's writing. So what that is there's a hole in the ceiling, and that's for calculating the date of Easter. Right? So it's a sort of, I don't know, astronomy experiment. It's like some sort of astronomical clock for calculating Easter, because that is very important in Catholicism and a lot of Christianity, just knowing when Easter is. And we think, oh, Christmas is the big holiday. I mean, it is these days, but Easter's a big deal. Because, I mean, according to Christianity, Christmas is when Jesus was born, but the purpose of Jesus was really to be sacrificed for the sins of the people, of the Christians. Anyway, Easter's a big deal in Christianity, so they want to calculate it. They need to know when it is. And it's fascinating because often you think of the church as being anti-science, but they actually like astronomy. They like knowing when the stars are. So anyways, there's this whole experiment set up. You can see it on the floor. You'll find it. It's very visible. And there's another thing that's really cool is they also have an area that's, I guess, for calculating the position of the North Star. So the tilt of the Earth will wobble, right? And as that happens over the millennia, I think it's a 12,000 year cycle or something like that, the position of the North Star will change. So they have this thing on the floor, and there's a hole in the ceiling, and I guess on a certain date or something, the light will come in, and that'll tell them where the North Star is. And it goes all the way into the future. It goes all the way past the present date, which is really cool, you know. Usually you don't see years written out in Roman numerals for the future, but you do here, which is pretty neat. So anyways, there's signs of the zodiac on the floor. It's a really cool thing. It's a massive, beautiful church with this astronomy experiment. These two astronomy, I call them experiments, but really it's more like it's like a clock or some sort of calculator, you know, kind of like Stonehenge or something, but for the Christians. So anyway, so there's a bit of interesting, I guess, I don't know what to really call it, symbolism, sort of. Well, Diocletian was known for doing the last great persecution of the Christians, and so his bathhouse was turned into a church, which is kind of neat. So they turned that persecutor of Christians, they turned his bath into a church, and I guess made it something good in their eyes out of something maybe bad. And there's also something else that I found interesting. There's an exhibit dedicated to Galileo. There's a pendulum. And of course, we know, well, the Catholic Church, what did they do to Galileo? Well, they didn't really like him. They persecuted him. And what I find really neat is this display is in between two confessionals, two confession booths. And as I was standing there, I was thinking, are they trying to, confess their sins? Are they seeking forgiveness? Of course, I mean, forgiveness from the public, maybe they're asking. Not their sort of religious forgiveness, but more public relations, forgiveness. I don't know. I thought it was neat, you have the display of Galileo between the two confessionals. Maybe they are asking for forgiveness. I don't know. I just like this church. I love it. Diocletian is my favorite emperor because he ended the crisis of the 3rd century. It could have ended there, but he changed the empire and allowed it to survive for centuries after that. Centuries in the West, over 1,000 years in the East. So I always think of this building as the Baths of Diocletian, even though it is a church. And there is actually a museum, if you go around the back, dedicated to the baths, the church itself only encompasses a small area, but you can go back there and there's statues, there's plaques explaining things, there's even, parts of the swimming pools. I call it a swimming pool. I don't know what they would have called it, but it's part of the baths, right? So you can go in and it's not very deep, but you can walk around the bottom there and you can see what it would have been like. It's really cool to walk back there. And there's just these there's a courtyard where there's a bunch of, they're not tombs, they're, I guess, some sort of memorials, because you couldn't bury people in the city, but I guess you could have their memorials in the city because, you don't want to bury people in the city because you'll have diseases, but you can have these stones with inscriptions on them to commemorate them in the city because, that's not going to do any harm and people are going to see it more, though people did see the tombs because often they would be on the sides of roads, but I guess you had to be kind of rich to afford that. So yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite places in Rome. I love this. It's right by Termini metro station. Termini is also the train station. So when you come out of the front, you can actually see the side of it. It's right by Repubblica metro station. So you come out, it's Piazza della Repubblica, and it's right there. And it's just, it's imposing. It's big. I think it's beautiful on the inside as well as the outside. You can even see, you can look at it and you can see there's a train station in the United States. I don't know if it still exists. I think it might be Grand Central of, I'm not sure which city, I'll have to check, but you can definitely see some design cues taken from, I think this place might be some common design features in Roman baths, but definitely I'll try to figure out which ones those were, which train station it is, and if there were some direct architectural influences. I think there are. I think I look at it and I see, yeah, sure, this is definitely based on the Baths of Diocletian. So I'm always fascinated by how the Romans had their structures fall into ruin, and then often it was the church would come and they would either just simply take it like they did with the Pantheon and make it a church, and they didn't really touch the Pantheon that much. But places like this, the Baths of Diocletian, they made it their own. They turned it into their church, and they redid the interior. The interior of the Pantheon, by the way, is mostly original, just by the way, whereas the interior of this place is not. There's a ton of places in Rome where you can just see the fusion between ancient and medieval and Renaissance. You go, there's this theater, and you can see it's just like there's apartment buildings on it. They just built buildings on it. I say apartment buildings, more like, I don't know, they built housing on it, either in the medieval or Renaissance period. There's an old forum nearby. I think it might have been a medieval fish market, right? And then you can see just the fusion between the medieval and the ancient, and it's really fascinating, right? We think often, oh yeah, ancient went away, then the medieval, but it was continuous, and they just built into them, And you would have had just ancient buildings next to medieval ones. Kind of like in any city today, you have the old buildings, and then you have the new ones next to them. So anyways, this is the Baths of Diocletian. or the Basilica of St. Mary and the Angels of the Martyrs. It's one of my favorite places in Rome, and you should definitely not miss it when you go. Despite its worn out, ruined exterior, the inside is absolutely beautiful, and you do not want to miss it.